there, lovely people. Welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. It has been a minute, but we are back. It took me a very long time to read this book, and I am sorry I did not anticipate it, even though I knew it was a very long one. This week I want to talk to you about The Poppy War, which has raving reviews all around. And I am a bit of an outlier, and I am so sorry because I should have known coming into it that I would be, but we'll get into that later. So if you don't know, The Poppy War is a fantasy book that is written in a history-adjacent world of China during the Opium Wars, and it follows a girl named Rin who has the ability to access a god through shamanistic practices, and that god gives her the ability to harness fire and become better in battle. She was originally a war orphan who was forced into a family of opium dealers in the south part of this country. She was poor and she studied really hard to get into the most prestigious military school in the country. The story follows her from her hometown into the school, from the school into her first war, and then throughout that war into her final actions of that particular battle. There's a lot of things that happen and a lot of things that are just sort of plot points that didn't stick out in my mind. I'm not entirely sure what all is the most valuable parts of this story and what is less valuable to the story, because I felt like there were a lot of things that weren't very valuable to me as a reader. So that's where I'm going to stick with my summary at this point, is that we're following Rin, the main girl who has these powers, who was poor, who went to military school. I think that's all you really need to know, but you can always look up the summary from other people. That's what I got out of it having read it. So let's get into my thoughts on the story. I really enjoyed Rin's conflicts at the beginning of the story. I really enjoyed watching and feeling those wins and losses as close as they were in the first part of the story. I felt like we were really connected to her. It was really easy to empathize with her experience at the beginning, and I really liked that. I also really enjoyed the dynamics that were established between the main character and the professors and other professors, and the main character and the other students at the beginning. I thought it was a really interesting way to navigate a political system and show us what was going on with the way that this world worked, and show how people were reacting to other people and how witnessing that influences Rin's understanding of the school political structure. It was really easy to pay attention and learn what those systems were through Rin also learning what the systems were, because it didn't feel like exposition. It felt like we were in school with her, and then it felt like we were just people watching with her because she was a little bit more distanced from the other people in the school, and I really appreciated how that was done. And I will say, I really enjoyed the beginning of this book in general. I was having a great time until like 30% in. I kept saying like, this is a really good book. I'm really enjoying this book. And then I got like 32% in, and I just kept struggling to read it. So we're gonna get into the improvements that I saw, and I understand that why I want these particular improvements, they could be the thing that makes the book enjoyable to you, because I don't like epics, and we've been through this in the past, but I don't like epics. I don't like how they're told. I don't enjoy them, and I didn't realize that this was an epic fantasy. I thought it was just a fantasy. So that's on me, because it doesn't follow a ridiculous amount of characters. We just stick with Rin throughout the whole thing. I just sort of assumed that it was just going to be like the other fantasies I've read, but this is definitely an epic, and there are a lot of things that epics do that I just do not enjoy. So I'm sure that a lot of the critiques that I have for this particular book are going to relate a lot to the fact that it's an epic. So take what I say with a grain of salt if you're somebody who enjoys epics, but I did just want to put that disclaimer out. I would have liked to see more of a connection to the internal conflict throughout the story. In reading the summary on Goodreads, the summary says that Rin is scared of losing her connection with her humanity. And that is something that is pitched as important in the like selling summary of this story. And I did not really see that. I didn't see that consistently. I didn't see her really connecting with her humanity. I feel like her having the threat of losing her humanity wasn't that big of a deal to me as a reader because I didn't see her engaging with humanity. I didn't see her empathizing with things around her very often. It was very rare, and because it was very rare, it felt fake. Like, it didn't feel like it was something that was in character. It felt like something that was there because it's supposed to be there, not there because it needs to be there. Like, for the character, they need to be feeling that. It felt like it was just there because it was supposed to be. And I don't like that disconnect at all. I am not a fan of having that not driven by the character, and especially for it to be marketed as one of the main driving forces. We're told more often than we see her dealing with that internal conflict. We're told that she is worried about it, but we don't see how that impacts her and how that changes how she makes decisions. We're just told that she thinks about it. That doesn't really do much, and we're not told often enough for us to think that it's something that is important the way that we would if we saw it, the amount of times that we were told about it in the story. It doesn't feel like it's that big of a deal based on the entirety of the story. And related to that, it kind of felt like there was a numbness to the character, that Rin wasn't necessarily experiencing the things that were going on around her. And like, Rin wasn't really having empathy towards the things that were going around her or the things that were happening to the people around her. That lack of empathy that she had made it so that I did not have much empathy for her and what she was going through, because it didn't feel like she was feeling anything. So I didn't feel anything. So I just ended up reading a bunch of words and seeing a bunch of things that happened, but not having any reason to correlate them together or to think very hard about any of them, which doesn't feel like the right thing. It doesn't feel right for me to just have read a bunch of things that happened unless it's history. And I don't really like history. And I feel like even actual real world history can give you some sort of emotional reaction. And I didn't get that out of the story. It felt like work, which could just be because I don't like epic formats, but it felt like work. There were times that the descriptions of the situation were so gory that we got such clear detail about what they were looking at, what the characters were looking at, what they were seeing, as much detail as possible about what they were looking at. And it didn't give how any of the characters were responding to it at all. So because none of the characters were responding to it, I felt like I shouldn't respond to it because they weren't responding to it. And I don't know if I was supposed to make my own judgments on how that was supposed to end up or what you were supposed to get out of that particular situation, but I did not get anything out of it. And it kind of just felt like it was being gory to be gory because it didn't have any impact on the characters. And I understand that it's not being gory to be gory. It's being gory because that's what the characters had to witness. But we didn't see the results from that situation during the gory part. Like, we didn't see the people responding to the gore in front of them. You have to do a lot of mental jumps to figure out where that particular scene with all of the gore impacts the character's choices afterwards. Because it's not right after. It's not like somebody reacts immediately, somebody throws up or anything like that, or like even crying. No emotional responses happened. The characters like disappeared during that particular scene. And it was just the description of the things around. A lot of exposition with no connection to the story that we'd been with. It was just describing. And I guess that's a thing that happens in epics, but I would have liked something to come from that scene rather than just having a mental image of all of the gore really, really clear in my mind because it was very well described, but feeling like it was without purpose. It's like it was designed to be so gory that the reader had to feel something, but because it was so expositional, you couldn't really. At least I couldn't really feel something because there was so much exposition. It could have hit really, really well, but it missed because it was just exposition. I also felt like time didn't really have any consistency in the story. There were some situations where you were waiting for something to happen and you got this clear detail of everything that was going on while you were waiting for something to happen. And then that thing happens and you turn the page and now it's been 2 months. Why? How are you going to have all of this build up to this situation and then just immediately lose all of that tension because it happened? And we don't get like details on how it happened. We just get that it's been going on for 2 months now. But we spent a whole chapter or two waiting for it to happen, and now it's just been going on. It didn't feel like anything served any purpose. And even when they were in school, there was a whole section, a paragraph went by and a year had passed. And I guess nothing important happened during that year because now it's their 3rd year of school and that's where they're at. And that's just how it works. Why? How can you go from one sentence to the next and it be another year without saying like a year had passed? There is no consistent value for time. Time was either at a standstill, we were taking forever, we were counting down, or time has gone by in a second and you don't realize how fast it had passed, which is very, very jarring, especially when they are back to back, where it's like we're spending so much time getting ready for this one thing and then a year has gone by, or months have gone by, or weeks have gone by, and we don't get any connection to why the time is passing. I also think the story would have been better if it had given more time to the other characters. The characters that we do actually spend time with, it makes sense why they're in the story. And then the ones that we don't spend time with, it doesn't. There is a group of characters that are really important to Rin, but we don't spend enough time with them to know why they are important to Rin, and we don't have that time to connect with them to establish them as being important to us, the readers, as well. So we connect with Rin, who is, for whatever reason, emotionally connected to these characters, and they're all very important. They are a driving force, something to keep her going, but we don't know anything about them. And I will say, learning something about another character reinvested me in the story. There was about 40% in the middle of the book that I just did not care, and I was forcing myself through so that I would have something to talk about. I was trying to get as far as I could before I gave up. I was gonna not finish this book, and then one more character's story was introduced and their background was introduced and why they are the way that they are was introduced, and I got reinvested in it. But without that, I probably would have given up at like 70% of the way in. I couldn't read more than 20 minutes at a time because I would get bored so fast, and having one more character's story reinvested me. So even if she just spent more time at random with the other characters, it would have made it more engaging for me. What can writers learn from this story? Even when I did not enjoy it, there are still things we can learn from every story that we interact with. I think this one is a good example of building a world off of real world history in a way that makes it separate from the real world, but is still clearly influenced and showing a existence of representation for a certain culture, for a certain historical event, and things like that. I also think this is a good example of building a religion. That's not something that takes a lot of effort to build, but it is a clear system that has rules and is easy enough to follow. Even if you don't know what the original reference is, you know how the religion works to the same level that the characters in the story know how the religion works. There's nothing that you were missing out on. I also think that this is a good example of raising the stakes slowly, having a higher level challenge every time you overcome one. The first section, the part that I really enjoyed, was about her being in school, or getting into school and then being in school. She has to overcome the challenge of studying for a test that most people spend their whole lives studying for. She has to overcome the challenge of getting into the highest level school and studying hard enough to get into that school. Then she has to overcome the challenge of making it through her first year of school while getting bullied. Then she has to make it through learning what she needs to learn at school. Then she has to make it through the start of this war and figure out who she is going to be in this new version of the world. From then on, the stakes are all gradually raising. And I think it's a very good example of that. I also think this is a good example of a story that has really great relationships without any of them being a love story, because there are a lot of characters that Rin creates really great bonds with, and none of them need to be romantic. None of them are moved towards romantic, and it just shows a great way of seeing a female character as an equal to a male character without forcing them into a romantic situation, which happens a lot. I think it's more interesting sometimes to go against what people expect, and this story definitely does a good job of teeing up those relationships that make you think what would happen, and then they just don't. But that is all that I've got for you today. I am so sorry if you enjoyed the Poppy War. If you are a big epic story kind of person, you will probably really like this book. I gave it 2 stars because I really enjoyed the first third. I thought the ending was like very, hey, we're gonna have a second book, and that kind of like turned me off from the very end as well. But there was a like 20% before the very end that was really good and I really enjoyed, but I couldn't with all of the exposition. It just was so hard to get through. I didn't care. If you're used to this particular style of writing, you'll probably enjoy it. I'm just not. But if you like this video, please hit that like button. If you disagree with me, if you think this book was amazing, hit that like button. It's just a difference of taste, because I know I see the potential in this, and I know that there are certain things that I just don't like technically that are a part of this format. So hit that like button. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. I will be here every Tuesday and Saturday for a Writing Tip Tuesday and a Story Study Saturday.